It was one of those nights where everything seemed to be going just right. Emma looked stunning, her hair falling in waves down her back, the delicate gold necklace I'd bought her on our anniversary catching the light from the chandelier overhead. She had that smile, the one I'd seen hundreds of times before, the one that always made me feel like the luckiest guy in the world. But tonight? Something was off. We were at this fancy restaurant, one of those places with velvet booths and waiters in black suits who know how to pour wine like they're making art. It should have been the perfect setting for a romantic evening, except I knew something wasn't right. I could feel it in the air. I had known Emma for years. Hell, we'd been married for almost 5, but lately I'd been noticing little things. The way her eyes darted away when I asked her a question, how she'd get quiet whenever I tried to talk about our future, and that little distant look in her eyes when we'd be in bed together, as if her mind was somewhere far away. At first, I told myself it was nothing. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then, I started picking up on more signs. Small ones. She'd started taking longer to answer texts, started leaving her phone face down on the kitchen counter. And when I asked her about it, she'd get defensive, saying, "You're so clingy lately. It's just work stuff." Yeah, work stuff. Still, I loved her. So when she suggested we go out for a quiet dinner to reconnect, I agreed. I thought maybe I was just overthinking things. But sitting across from her now, watching the way she kept glancing at her phone, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on. She laughed at one of Jack's jokes, some cheesy line about work hard, play harder that didn't even sound funny, and for a second, I almost believed it was just a regular night. But then her phone buzzed, and her smile faltered. I saw it. Just for a second, the way her face went pale, the way her eyes locked onto the screen. She quickly shoved the phone in her bag, trying to cover it up like nothing happened. But I knew. "Everything okay?" I asked, trying to sound casual, but I'm sure she could hear the edge in my voice. She nodded quickly, her laugh a little too forced. "Yeah, of course. Just work stuff. You know how it is." But the thing was, I didn't know how it was. Not anymore. Her words felt like they were slipping past me, like I was listening to someone I didn't really know. She wasn't telling me the truth. I tried to shake it off, but it was hard. The tension in the air felt thick, like I was suffocating with every minute that passed. Emma seemed like she was trying too hard to be relaxed, but every time her phone buzzed, I saw the subtle twitch in her fingers, the way she'd look at the screen and then quickly tuck it away. It wasn't even just the phone. There was something about her whole demeanor. The way she kept shifting in her seat, the way her laugh never quite reached her eyes. It wasn't like her. And yet, I told myself again, I had no right to accuse her. Maybe I was just paranoid. Maybe I had too much time on my hands. But the longer the evening wore on, the more it ate at me. At some point, the waiter came by to refill our wine glasses, and I glanced down at my own, half full, barely touched. She had barely drunk any of hers either. And then I caught it. A tiny, quick glance at her phone again, her fingers hesitating just a little before she picked it up. This time, I couldn't ignore it. I decided to speak up. "Emma, is everything okay?" My voice was soft, calm, but I meant it. I needed to hear her say something that made sense, something that made me feel like I wasn't going crazy. She froze for a second, her eyes darting over to mine. I swear I saw her panic, just for a second, before her usual smile came back, a little too wide. "Yeah," she said, setting the phone down on the table a little too forcefully. "I told you, it's just work stuff. Some deadline I have to hit. You know how it is." She laughed again, but it was empty, hollow. I stared at her. There was a pause, one of those uncomfortable silences that felt like it stretched on forever. "Right," I said, finally breaking it, but my gut was already screaming that something wasn't right. "Well, I'm glad you're getting it all sorted out." But the words felt wrong coming out of my mouth. It wasn't just about work anymore. I could feel it. Whatever was happening, it was bigger than that. The next time her phone buzzed, I didn't even need to look at it to know something had changed. Her hand shook a little when she picked it up, and her eyes flickered down at the screen so quickly that it almost seemed intentional. But before I could ask her again, something even stranger happened. Jack, her friend, as she liked to call him, stood up from the table. He'd been sitting across the restaurant, holding court like he usually did, cracking jokes and drawing attention from everyone around him. But now, his face was suddenly pale. He glanced at his phone, his fingers tight around it. He didn't look like the confident, charismatic guy Emma always raved about. He looked worried. I watched as he glanced at Emma, his eyes darting quickly over to me before he turned and bolted toward the door, muttering something under his breath. Emma immediately shot up from her chair. "Where's he going?" I asked, almost on reflex, my voice catching in my throat. She blinked, a little too quickly. "I don't know. Probably some emergency or something." She stood there, staring at the door where Jack had just exited. Her lips parted, but no words came out. And then, like a bad instinct kicking in, I felt it. She wasn't just lying. She was hiding something. I watched her, standing there frozen for a moment, her eyes glued to the spot where Jack had disappeared. There was something about the way she lingered, like she was waiting for a signal to go after him, but she didn't move. It wasn't just confusion. It was panic. I could see it in the way her hands were trembling, the way she kept smoothing her dress like it would somehow calm her nerves. But it wasn't calming anything. I knew she wasn't telling me the truth. I had known for a while, but now, it was like the whole thing was crashing down on me. The lies, the distractions, the little moments where I felt like I wasn't being seen. Everything started to feel like it was part of some script, and I was just waiting for the next line to come. "Emma," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know why I spoke. It wasn't like she was going to give me an honest answer. I didn't even know what I was hoping for. But I needed her to say something. I needed something real from her, just once. She turned back to me, and there it was again, another quick, forced smile. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, her tone flat, like she was trying to convince herself more than me. "He's probably just got some business thing going on." But she wasn't even looking at me anymore. She was looking at the door, her eyes flickering nervously back and forth. The phone buzzed again in her purse, but this time, she didn't flinch. She just stared. My gut was twisted into knots. There was something off, something deeper than her playing coy with me. I could almost feel it, a knot in my chest that had been tightening for weeks now. My mind started to race. What if she's seeing him? What if it's more than just work stuff? I tried to push the thought away, but it wouldn't leave. Before I could ask her anything more, her phone rang, loud enough that it cut through the tension in the air. She grabbed it almost too quickly, like she was afraid someone would see it, and took the call in a quiet, almost inaudible voice. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see the shift in her posture. She leaned in, whispering, her eyes flicking around nervously like she didn't want anyone to overhear. Her fingers gripped the phone tightly, her knuckles turning white. She was talking fast, too fast, like she was trying to cover something up, or trying to make sure she didn't say the wrong thing. I sat there, watching her, and a sudden thought struck me. What if she's not just hiding something from me right now? What if she's been hiding this whole thing for months? The feeling in my gut was undeniable. Something was happening, something I wasn't a part of. Something that didn't have a place in our marriage. When she finally hung up, there was no apology, no explanation. She just stood there, face flushed, like she'd just gotten caught doing something she didn't want to get caught doing. She glanced over at me, and for the first time tonight, I saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. It was brief, just a flash, but it was enough to confirm what I already knew. The silence stretched between us like a chasm. Then, without another word, Emma grabbed her purse and stood up. "I'll be right back," she said. But it wasn't an explanation, it was a retreat. A way to escape, to distance herself. I watched her walk toward the bathroom, her steps quick and unsteady. That was when I knew. Everything was unraveling, and I was just standing there, watching it happen. I sat there alone, the quiet hum of the restaurant around me feeling louder than ever. The waiter passed by, but I barely noticed him. I couldn't stop staring at the spot where Emma had just been. The table in front of me seemed suddenly too big, the chairs too empty. The whole night felt hollow. I didn't know how long I sat there, but it felt like forever. My mind was spinning, piecing together all the small things that didn't add up. The way she'd pull away when I tried to kiss her, how she'd start acting distant for no reason, the way she started hiding her phone like it was some secret that didn't belong to me. I tried to talk myself out of it, told myself it was nothing. Maybe she was just stressed. But I couldn't ignore the feeling in my gut anymore. A few minutes passed, then 10, then 15. Still no sign of Emma. I glanced at the door to the bathroom, waiting for her to come back. But she didn't. It was like she had just vanished. I was getting restless, confused. And then, my phone buzzed in my pocket. At first, I thought it might be her. But no, it was a message from an unknown number. The message made my heart stop. Enjoy your evening. It won't last long. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. I read them again, trying to make sense of them. Who the hell was this? It was a strange feeling, like someone was watching me, waiting for me to catch on to something I wasn't seeing. I was already on edge, but this made my blood run cold. My hands were shaking when I typed a quick reply, just to see if I could get something out of them. Who is this? I sent it, though I already had a sinking feeling that I knew the answer. Nothing came back. No response. But the feeling of dread only deepened. I glanced at the bathroom door again. Emma still hadn't come back. I sat there for a few more minutes, watching the seconds tick by. It was starting to get unbearable. I stood up, walked to the bathroom door, and knocked softly. No answer. I knocked again, a little harder this time. Still nothing. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep pretending. I had to know. I turned back to the table, grabbed my coat, and left my credit card on the table with a tip. It was like I was in a trance, just moving through the motions, my heart thumping in my chest as I made my way toward the exit. I didn't know where Emma had gone, but I was done waiting. The truth was right there, staring me in the face, and I wasn't going to sit around pretending I couldn't see it anymore. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, the world felt different. I wasn't sure what I was about to walk into, but I knew I had to follow this path, wherever it led. I pulled out my phone and sent one last message to Emma. Where are you? I stood there in the street, watching the little dots on my phone screen blink, waiting for her reply. But just as I expected, nothing. I didn't know it then, but that moment, that very moment, would change everything. I stood outside in the cold, the night air biting at my skin, waiting for something, anything that would make sense of the mess in my head. The streets were quieter now, the usual chatter of the city replaced by the distant hum of traffic. I kept checking my phone, watching the dots blink endlessly as I waited for Emma to respond, but nothing came. No texts, no calls, just silence. I didn't know what I was expecting her to say. Maybe something explaining her odd behavior, some excuse that would make it all go away. But deep down, I already knew the truth. I had known for a while now. Every small lie, every distracted moment, every time I caught her in a half-truth, it was all building up to this. I glanced at my phone again. Still nothing. The knot in my stomach tightened. This wasn't just about her being late or acting distant anymore. This was about everything I'd ignored, everything I had convinced myself wasn't as bad as it seemed. It was about her, about me, about us, and how something was slipping through my fingers that I couldn't control. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I had to do something. I couldn't just let her walk away from this without facing the music. I turned on my heels and walked briskly to the car. My hands were shaking as I gripped the steering wheel, but I couldn't stop. I had to find her. I wasn't sure where she'd gone, but I had a gut feeling. She wouldn't just leave without telling me. Not unless something had happened. I pulled out of the parking lot, my mind racing. I checked my phone again. Nothing. But something was eating at me, something I hadn't quite put together yet. Emma's not answering, Jack's weird behavior. And that message. It was starting to fall into place, like a puzzle I didn't want to solve but had no choice but to. I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear what was coming next, but I had to know. I drove through the city streets, my eyes scanning for any sign of her, any sign that she was nearby. The message from the unknown number kept echoing in my head. It won't last long. Whoever had sent it knew something I didn't. They knew about Emma. They knew about Jack. I drove around aimlessly for what felt like an eternity, until something stopped me cold. There it was. A familiar car. Emma's car. Parked outside a place I never expected to see it. It was a bar, nothing fancy, just a dive in a quieter part of town. But that wasn't the part that caught my attention. It was who was standing outside, leaning against the hood of her car, looking casual and relaxed. Jack. My stomach dropped. I parked across the street, keeping my distance, watching as Jack laughed and talked to someone I couldn't quite see from where I was. But I knew. It was Emma. She was inside, no doubt. I didn't move. I just sat there, staring at the bar, the weight of the moment pressing on me. The world had stopped spinning. The pieces were coming together, and all I could do was watch, helpless, as the truth unfolded in front of me. Everything I had been afraid of was real. Emma, Jack, they were here, together. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. But it wasn't working. Not anymore. I had to see this through. I had to hear it from her own mouth. Whatever this was, it wasn't just some misunderstanding. I got out of the car and walked toward the bar, each step heavier than the last. I wasn't sure what would happen when I walked in there, but I wasn't turning back now. Emma had made her choice. Now it was time to face the consequences. The bar felt too loud, too alive, for the quiet storm that was building inside me. The door swung open with a heavy thud as I stepped in, the clink of glasses and chatter in the air, but it all felt distant, like I wasn't really there. I was looking for something, anything, that would make sense of what I'd been feeling for months. And then I saw them. Emma was sitting at a corner booth with Jack, laughing, looking like she hadn't a care in the world. It was the kind of laugh she used to give me when we were happy. Genuine, carefree. But now it was hollow. And the way she was leaning in toward Jack, her eyes sparkling like she was exactly where she wanted to be, made my stomach twist. I froze for a moment, watching them. My heart felt like it had dropped into my gut, but I didn't move. I couldn't. The truth was staring me in the face, and I didn't know if I was ready to face it yet. But I couldn't turn away either. Jack noticed me first. His eyes went wide as soon as he saw me standing there. Emma turned, her smile slipping when she caught sight of me. She didn't even try to hide the shock on her face, and I could see her hands trembling slightly as she pushed her hair back. "Michael," she said, her voice tight, trying to sound casual but failing. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, trying to hold it together. I could feel the anger bubbling up, but I wasn't going to lose control. Not in front of them. "I think you know why I'm here," I said, my voice steady, even though my hands were balled into fists. I looked over at Jack, who was now shifting uncomfortably in his seat. His face had gone pale, and he was avoiding my eyes. "You didn't think I'd find out?" I asked. But it wasn't a question. It was a statement. "Did you really think I wouldn't notice?" Emma opened her mouth, but no words came out. I wasn't giving her a chance to lie to me anymore. All the late nights, the excuses, the way you've been acting like I'm not even here. I trailed off, my chest tightening. "And this?" I motioned to the table, to her and Jack. "You think I can't see it?" "Michael, please," Emma started, her voice shaking, but I wasn't having it. "Don't lie to me," I cut her off. "I've been watching you both. Watching how you've been sneaking around, pretending it's nothing. And don't try to tell me this isn't exactly what it looks like." Jack shifted again, his hands twitching, and I could see the guilt in his face. But I didn't care about him. He was just the guy who'd been playing the part she wanted. The real issue was Emma. "I'm sorry, okay," she said, her voice breaking as she reached out for me, but I stepped back, not letting her touch me. "I didn't mean for any of this to happen." "I'm confused, Michael." "Confused?" I repeated, incredulous. "You're not confused. You're choosing him." There was a long pause, the weight of the words hanging in the air between us. Emma's eyes welled up with tears, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for her. "Not anymore. You made your choice," I said quietly, but firmly. "Now live with it." I turned on my heel, walking toward the door without another word. I didn't look back, not at her, not at Jack. I didn't need to see them anymore. The door slammed behind me as I stepped back into the night, the cold air hitting me like a wave. The silence that followed was heavier than anything I had felt before. I didn't need to hear her excuses. I didn't need to hear anything more. It was over. I didn't know where I was going. I just kept driving, the streetlights blurring past, my hands gripping the wheel like I could hold onto something. Anything, while everything else slipped through my fingers. The car felt too small, too cramped for all the thoughts that were racing through my head. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Anger, yeah, it was still there, bubbling beneath the surface, but it didn't feel like enough. I had wanted this confrontation, hadn't I? I'd wanted to know. I'd wanted to see the truth with my own eyes. Well, now I had it. And all it did was leave me empty. The silence in the car was deafening. I tried to focus on the road, but all I could see was Emma's face, the way she looked at me when I walked in, the way she pretended like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just betrayed me. I wanted to scream, to throw something. But there was nothing left to fight for, was there? She'd already chosen him. I wasn't the one she wanted. I pulled over to the side of the road, cutting the engine and sitting there in the dark. I wasn't sure if I was waiting for something, or just trying to catch my breath. The sky overhead was clear, the stars barely visible through the city haze. It was all so still. And then my phone buzzed in my pocket. I looked down at it without picking it up. It was from Emma. I didn't need to read it to know what it would say. Probably another apology. Another excuse. Another lie. I didn't respond. I didn't even open it. I wasn't ready to talk to her. I wasn't ready to hear the words she was going to say. Maybe it was easier to pretend I didn't see the message at all. Easier to believe that everything would stay the same if I just kept driving, if I kept putting miles between me and her. I took a deep breath, slamming my hand on the steering wheel, the sound loud in the otherwise quiet night. What the hell was I supposed to do now? Part of me wanted to go back to the apartment, to storm through the door and demand some kind of explanation, some kind of closure. But I knew it would be pointless. I had already seen everything I needed to see. There was no going back. Another buzz from my phone. This time, I picked it up. The message from Emma blinked on the screen. Michael, please, don't leave me. I made a mistake. Please talk to me. I felt something cold crawl through my chest, a knot tightening in my stomach. But I didn't reply. Not then. Not when everything felt so raw, when the hurt still hadn't fully hit me. I hit the button to end the conversation, letting the phone drop back into the seat next to me. What else was there to say? I couldn't keep pretending this wasn't happening. I couldn't keep lying to myself like she hadn't just shattered everything I thought I knew about her, about us. The worst part wasn't even the betrayal. It was the silence that came after. The realization that I was completely alone. That the life I thought I had, the future I had imagined, was just an illusion. I wasn't the man she wanted anymore, and I sure as hell wasn't the man she'd been sleeping with. I started the car again and pulled back onto the road. No destination in mind. No real plan. Just driving, one foot in front of the other, trying to outrun the ache in my chest. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to keep moving, because stopping meant facing it all. And right now, I wasn't ready to do that. Not yet. I didn't know what the hell was next. All I knew was that I couldn't go back. And I couldn't forgive her. Not now. Not ever. I didn't want to go back to the apartment. The thought of stepping through that door, into the life that had been ripped apart, felt suffocating. Everything I had known seemed to be falling apart, but I couldn't avoid it. I had to face it. The drive back felt endless. I kept replaying everything, Emma's face at the bar, the way she'd looked guilty but still tried to act normal. I had to admit it to myself. This was over. When I finally pulled into the parking lot, the building looked the same as always, but tonight it felt like a cage. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me as I walked through the door. I wasn't ready for what was inside, but I didn't have a choice. Emma was on the couch when I walked in. She looked small, huddled in a blanket, eyes red, like she'd been crying for hours. She didn't even try to stand up when I entered. Her voice was shaky when she said my name. Michael. I didn't move. I didn't know what to say, didn't know what I was supposed to feel. Everything about her felt distant now. I'm not going to pretend anymore, I said, the words coming out colder than I meant. I know what's been going on. She closed her eyes, like she was bracing herself for the storm. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't mean for this to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? I repeated, my voice tight. You didn't mean to hurt me? But you did. You chose him. You let this go too far. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't moved. I'm so sorry, Michael, she said again, her voice breaking. Please, don't leave me. I made a mistake. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping me. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. And now I'm making mine. She took a step toward me, but I stepped back. I wasn't going to let her touch me, not after everything. Please, Michael, she whispered again, but I couldn't listen anymore. I'm done, I said, my voice hard. You've already chosen. Now I'm choosing too. I turned away and walked out, the door clicking shut behind me. I didn't look back. There was nothing left to say. Nothing left to save. I didn't know where I was going, or what I was supposed to do next. I just kept walking, my feet moving automatically. The air felt colder now, sharper. Every step away from that apartment felt like putting more distance between the life I had and the life that was now waiting for me. But I didn't know what that life looked like yet. I ended up at a bar. I didn't even think about it. My legs just carried me there. The place was half empty, the dim lights casting shadows over everything. I grabbed a seat at the end of the bar, ordered a drink, and tried to ignore the gnawing emptiness in my chest. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and for a second, I thought about ignoring it. But when I saw Emma's name flash on the screen, I couldn't help it. I picked it up. Her voice was shaky, like she'd been crying for hours. Michael, please just talk to me. I know I messed up. I don't know what I was thinking, but I'm so sorry. Please don't leave me like this. I didn't say anything at first. What was there to say? I just stared at the glass in front of me, the amber liquid swirling inside. Michael, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. Don't, I finally replied. My voice felt raw, like I hadn't used it in days. You don't get to do this. You don't get to come back and ask for forgiveness. Not after everything. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a second, I thought maybe she'd hung up. But then I heard her voice again, quieter, defeated. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I just didn't want to lose you. I squeezed the phone tighter, fighting the urge to throw it against the wall. The nerve of her. She had already lost me. I'm sorry, she whispered again, but it wasn't enough anymore. It wasn't even close. I hung up without another word, setting the phone down on the bar with a heavy thud. I felt numb. The kind of numb where you know you should be feeling something, but you can't quite reach it. I looked at the bartender, who was wiping down the counter, and asked for another drink. He didn't say anything, just poured it and slid it over to me. I stared at it for a second before taking a slow sip. It didn't fix anything. It didn't make me forget what had happened. It didn't make the pain go away. But for a moment, the world felt a little quieter, a little more manageable. I wasn't home. I wasn't near her. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't ready to go back. But I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I had to face whatever was waiting for me, whatever that was. I woke up the next morning with the kind of headache that felt like it was lodged deep in my skull. My thoughts were sluggish, but they came flooding back fast when I realized where I was. The bar. The half-empty glass in front of me. My phone still lying there beside it, vibrating every few seconds with notifications. Emma's name flashing on the screen again. I rubbed my temples, trying to push the fog away. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear any more apologies. I had made my decision the night before, and I wasn't going back on it. I couldn't. But still, the text messages kept coming. Michael, please talk to me. I can't do this without you. I made a huge mistake. Please, Michael. I don't know how to fix this, but I want to. I love you. I read the first one, then the second. My heart twisted, but I didn't let myself feel it. I was done feeling sorry for her. For us. She'd made her choice, and I had to make mine. The silence between us was the only thing left that made sense. I tossed my phone back on the bar and paid my tab. My legs felt heavy as I walked outside, the sun glaring down like it was mocking me. I didn't want to go home, not yet, anyway, but I knew I couldn't keep running. Not forever. The apartment still looked the same when I got back, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. It felt like someone else's place, a place where all my things were just scattered memories, waiting to be boxed up and shipped away. I wasn't sure what to expect when I walked through the door, but there she was again. Emma, sitting on the couch, her eyes swollen from crying. "Michael," she said, her voice shaking. I just stood there, feeling the weight of everything between us, all the unspoken words, all the broken pieces we couldn't put back together. "You don't get to do this," I said, the words coming out harder than I meant. "You don't get to pretend like nothing happened. Like you didn't make your choice." "I know," she whispered, her voice cracking, her hands twisting in her lap. "I know I messed up. I didn't think it would get this far, Michael. I never wanted to hurt you." She tried to stand, but I held up my hand, stopping her. "I don't need your excuses," I said. "You did this. You hurt me. And I'm not going to sit around waiting for you to fix it. You already made your choice. I was stupid. I was so stupid," she said, her voice breaking now. "But I love you, Michael. I always have." It hit me then, how much I didn't want to hear those words anymore. The love that once felt real, that we'd built our life around, now it felt like a lie. And no amount of "I'm sorry" or "I love you" could change it. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just felt nothing. It was the worst feeling of all. "I can't do this anymore, Emma," I said quietly, turning toward the door. "I'm done." She didn't try to stop me this time. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, watching me go. I left without looking back. And this time, I didn't feel the need to make excuses or hold on to anything. I was finally free. The days that followed felt like I was walking through a fog. Everything seemed muted, like I was living in someone else's life. I didn't know what to do with myself. I kept going through the motions, work, eating, sleeping, but it felt like I was just filling time until I figured out what came next. I didn't hear from Emma again that night. Or the next day. The silence between us stretched on, heavy and suffocating, like the calm before a storm. It was almost worse than the constant flood of texts and phone calls. At least with those I could feel something. Anger, hurt, frustration. But now there was just emptiness. I'd been so used to hearing her voice, to hearing her tell me everything would be okay, that I didn't know what to do with the quiet. The house was too still. Even the air felt different. I avoided going back to the apartment. I stayed at a friend's place for a few days, just trying to get my head straight. It was the first time I'd ever really been on my own, and even though it felt good to escape for a while, the weight of everything still hung around my neck like a stone. Eventually, I went back to the apartment. The door was still locked, but it felt like there was nothing left inside for me. I opened it anyway, the sound of the door creaking like an old memory. Emma's things were still everywhere. Her shoes by the door, her perfume on the bathroom counter, the coffee mugs we used every morning sitting on the kitchen shelf. It was all just there, waiting for me to pick it all up and figure out what to do with it. I walked through the apartment slowly, not sure what I was expecting to find. But when I got to the bedroom, I saw the empty space on her side of the bed. That's when it really hit me. She was gone. I wasn't just angry or hurt anymore. I was done. I knew that I had to move on, but it felt so final. I stood there for a moment, just taking it all in. The bed was the same, the sheets the same, but without her in it, everything felt different. It wasn't just the room. It was my life. The silence felt even more deafening in that moment. No more lies. No more pretending. Just the cold truth of what had happened. I had loved her, trusted her, and she had betrayed me. And now I was the one left to clean up the mess. I grabbed a few of her things, the things that still had meaning, and set them aside. But most of it, I just left there. What was the point of holding on to any of it? The memories? The promises? They were all shattered now. As I sat there, looking at the place we had shared, I realized that this wasn't just the end of a marriage. It was the end of a version of me. The man who had been so certain, so sure that love was enough. The man who thought trust was something that could never be broken. That man didn't exist anymore. But in some twisted way, that felt like the beginning of something new. Maybe it wasn't the future I had imagined, but it was mine now, and I would figure out what came next, just like I had to figure out who I was in all of this. But not today. Today, I just needed to be alone. A few days passed, and the silence between me and Emma felt like it was closing in on me. I hadn't heard from her. Not a call, not a message. At first, I figured it was her giving me space, maybe hoping I'd come around. But as the days stretched on, the silence just made everything worse. I couldn't figure out if I was relieved or just empty. I kept myself busy with work, trying to forget, trying not to think about the mess at home. But no matter how much I tried to distract myself, the loneliness crept in, especially at night when the apartment felt too quiet. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. My stomach sank. I knew who it was. Hello. My voice was tight. Michael. It was Jack. My heart skipped a beat. What the hell did he want? This is Jack, he said, hesitating. I need to talk to you. I didn't want to hear from him. I didn't want to hear any more excuses, but something inside me made me ask, what do you want? I know this is hard for you, man, but I need to explain. I don't want things to get worse, Jack said, his tone low. I scoffed, already frustrated. Explain? What's there to explain? You slept with my wife. That's pretty clear. There was a pause on the other end. I didn't mean for it to go that far, Jack said. It wasn't supposed to get so serious. Right, so you used her, I snapped. And now you want to apologize? That doesn't fix anything. I didn't want to hurt you, Michael. I swear, Jack said quickly. I didn't want this. But Emma. She was looking for something, and I gave it to her. I felt the anger rise in my chest. She chose you. Don't act like this was some accident. She wanted this. I know, he said softly, like he didn't know how to make it better. And I'm sorry. I'm just trying to own up to it. The audacity of him. You don't get to fix this with an apology, Jack. It's done. It's over. There was silence, and then he sighed. Okay, I get it. I just wanted you to know I didn't mean for any of this. I didn't even respond. I was done listening. You've said enough, I muttered, ending the call. I stared at the phone, trying to process everything, but it didn't feel like anything had changed. Jack's apology didn't make it better. It didn't fix the mess they'd made. I tossed my phone aside, walked to the window, and stared out at the dark street below. I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living in this shadow. I needed to move on. And for the first time in a long while, I felt like I could. I spent the next few days in a haze, moving through life like I was on autopilot. The quiet of the apartment was starting to feel less suffocating, but it didn't make the emptiness go away. It was like living in a house that had been abandoned by someone else. My own home, but nothing felt like it belonged to me anymore. I didn't hear from Emma again, and part of me thought she might have given up. But then, the message came. It was late one night, when I'd been sitting on the couch, staring at the TV without really watching. My phone buzzed, and I saw her name pop up on the screen. My stomach turned, and for a second, I hesitated. I thought about ignoring it, just letting the silence stand. But then I opened it. Michael, please, can we talk? I need to explain everything. I never meant to hurt you. I love you. It was the same message I had been getting for days, but this time, it felt different. This time, it wasn't about her feeling guilty or sorry. It was about her wanting something from me. She wanted me to fix this for her. She wanted me to tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't do that anymore. I couldn't keep letting her pull me back in with empty promises. I stared at the screen for a long time, the words blurry through the sudden rush of emotions in my chest. Love. She loved me. Maybe once, she had. But not now. Not after everything. I put the phone down and rubbed my face. For the first time in a long time, I felt something that wasn't anger, wasn't sadness. I felt clarity. I wasn't going to respond. I wasn't going to let her do this to me again. I had spent years thinking that if I loved her enough, if I forgave her enough, things would get better. But they hadn't. They'd only gotten worse. And I wasn't going to keep holding on to a broken dream, hoping it would fix itself. The next day, I went to the apartment and packed up the last of Emma's things. Clothes, books, things that still felt like they belonged to someone else. I didn't have to say anything. There was no big confrontation. I didn't need to yell or cry. I just packed up her stuff, set it all by the door, and made sure I didn't leave anything behind that I might want to take back. Then, I signed the divorce papers. I didn't even think about it. I didn't need to. This wasn't about vengeance, or proving a point. It was about taking control of my life again. About ending the cycle of hurt, of lies, of pretending things could ever go back to how they were. When I walked out of that apartment for the last time, I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I just felt done. There was nothing left to fight for. As I drove away, I finally felt the weight lifting off my chest. The future was still unclear, but at least it was mine. All mine. And that was enough for now. The weeks after the divorce were strange. It wasn't relief exactly, but more like I was caught in the space between two lives. My routine stayed the same: work, friends, the ones who stuck around, and the apartment. Except now, it was just me. Emma's absence felt huge, but in a way, it also felt like a weight had lifted. The silence was easier to live with than the constant tension of pretending everything was fine. I didn't erase her stuff right away. Her side of the bed, the little things she left behind, they were all still here. I didn't want to throw it all out. It didn't feel real to just erase her from everything. So, I let it sit there. I didn't talk to Emma. I knew she was still trying to reach out, probably with more apologies or explanations, but I wasn't interested. I had heard enough. She had made her choice, and I had to make mine. It was time to move on. Some days, I wondered if I'd ever trust anyone again. The thought of opening up to someone else seemed impossible. But then, I'd remember how far I'd come, how I wasn't stuck in that toxic cycle anymore. I could breathe again. For the first time in a long time, it felt like I was starting to rebuild. I took up running again. At first, it was just to get out of the apartment, but it became more than that. I was rediscovering a part of myself that had been buried for so long. I also reconnected with old friends who had disappeared when things with Emma got complicated. They didn't judge me or rush me. They just listened. And little by little, I started to feel like I was getting back on track. I wasn't forgetting what had happened, but I was learning how to live with it. The pain wasn't gone, but I wasn't drowning in it anymore. Sometimes, the loneliness crept back in, but it didn't suffocate me the way it used to. I was healing, even if it was slow. One night, while reading a book I hadn't picked up in years, I realized something. I was okay. Not perfect, not over everything, but I had survived. I was starting to rebuild, piece by piece. And that was enough for now. A few months had passed since the divorce, and everything was slowly starting to feel lighter. Not easy, but lighter. The weight of the past still hung around, but it wasn't dragging me down as much. I was adjusting to the quiet, getting used to the space that was now mine. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Life had begun to find a rhythm again. I wasn't waiting for some grand moment of clarity, but small things started to matter. Waking up early for a run, making breakfast, reading without rushing. Normal, simple stuff. And for the first time in a long time, normal felt good. I still thought about Emma sometimes, but it wasn't the same. The love I thought I had for her had turned into something else. Resentment, maybe, or just a deep, unspoken disappointment. She wasn't the person I thought she was, and I wasn't the same guy who'd forgive anything just to keep the peace. I started seeing a therapist a few weeks ago. At first, I didn't think it would help, but talking through everything was a relief. I wasn't looking for answers, just a place to say everything I'd been holding in. It wasn't about fixing things, just about letting go. One Saturday afternoon, I ran into Sarah, an old friend from college. We hadn't kept in touch much after I got married, but she was in town and we decided to catch up. The conversation started off casual, but then it felt real. Just two people connecting, no strings attached. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was carrying a weight. When we said goodbye, I didn't feel the need to rush or fill any gaps. It was just nice to talk. To exist without the baggage of my past relationships. I wasn't looking for anything. Maybe I'd meet someone else. Maybe I wouldn't. But for the first time, I wasn't defined by what Emma had done. I had my life, my peace, and that was enough.